Welcome to our fourth fostering care panel conversation, long-term healing and well-being for current and former youth in care. My name is Veronica Krupnick, and I am the Mentorship, Advocacy, and Peer Support Program Coordinator with CASA First, and I'll be your host for today's panel. I'm very excited about today's conversation and to have the opportunity to host these meaningful conversations and to be able to share space with my fellow lived experience advocates from across the country. The intention of this project and these conversations is to bring awareness, empathy, and compassion back to the humans whose lives have been impacted by the child welfare system. This project is very much based on the human experiences, the stories, the perspectives, and most importantly, the hearts of each of our panelists. What I have valued most about the entirety of this project is the way that we have shown up for each other, not only as panelists, but as community. We hope you've enjoyed these conversations so far, and we would love to continue these conversations with you all. Before I introduce today's panelists, I would like to pause and say that as we share our personal experiences, there may be emotionally triggering or emotionally difficult experiences to hear. So we do ask that you take this panel series at your own pace and to take care of yourself. In this fourth panel, focused on long-term healing and well-being, we will share with you about resources that supported our own healing, how we moved from survival to healing, and alternatives to traditional healing methods. We will also speak on how representation and cultural awareness plays a role in an individual's healing journey. And lastly, as always, we will share hope and vision for the future. I am so excited to be joined by three powerhouse voices who are already leading transformational work and conversations within child welfare. So let's introduce our panelists. James Harris is the founder of Men to Heal. He is a licensed mental health professional and holds a master's degree in clinical mental health counseling. James is a TEDx talk speaker as well as an international speaker on the topics of mental health, entrepreneurship, DEI, and much more. In 2018, James created Men to Heal, a movement to bring awareness to the stigma surrounding mental health among boys and men, as well as underserved populations. James is an Army veteran, a serial entrepreneur, and a community advocate. He has a host of investments, and this includes opening the Healing Hub in 2019, which is a wellness center that offers outpatient therapy, yoga, mindfulness, and financial resources to the community. Angela Quijada-Banks is an NAACP Image Awards nominee and an American Award-winning author of the Black Foster Youth Handbook. As a highly requested transformational speaker and certified holistic health coach, she has touched thousands with her message to alchemize your pain to purpose and power. As a nationally recognized community leader and philanthropist, she started her company and movement, Soulful Liberation, which has impacted over 30,000 people to revolutionize historically oppressive systems through holistic health and healing trauma, through coaching, workshops, training, and programming. Alejandra Gomez is an indigenous Chicana woman who advocates to uplift the voices, experiences, and wisdom of young Black, Indigenous, and people of color who have been impacted by homelessness in the foster care system. Using her experience and expertise, she educated California's legislative officials and their staff, policymakers, youth service providers, community leaders, as well as youth, to collectively address youth homelessness during the pandemic statewide. Serving with the National Foster Youth Institute, Native Youth Academy, and California Coalition for Youth empowered her to develop her Indigenous leadership skills as a change agent to build the better world she hopes to see in her lifetime. Okay. Well, thank you all for being here and being willing to participate in this panel on healing and well-being for youth in and those who've experienced care in the past. I think is a huge topic for alumni and for youth currently in care to listen to, as well as providers to hear some perspective on this topic. We're going to open up this panel with talking about what has played a role in each of your healing and well-being journey outside of therapy. I think we hear therapy is pushed often a lot in the foster care world. So I would love to hear, to start the panel with that question of, in addition to therapy, what else has played a role in your healing and well-being journey?
Go ahead, James.
Oh yeah, I didn't know if we had a specific structure that we was doing, but I think for me personally, mindfulness and a lot of self-care, just having a positive attitude, also approaching different roles and perspectives due to my life has definitely played an additional role in addition to going to therapy. And for me personally, like my job status now is an actual therapist. So, you know, being and doing psychotherapy is definitely beneficial, but there are some other interventions and tools that you can use, in which I also prescribe to my clients that I see. And one of the reasons I'm a therapist now is because I had a poor experience in the system with actual psychotherapy. So for me now to give back and be in this position and to help and to, I guess, display and encourage others to have different interventions that they do beyond just talk therapy is a gratifying experience. So the mindfulness, the self-care, the positive attitudes, the journaling, the yoga, different meditation and stuff like that, opposed to just talk therapy. Because again, like when I was in the system, it felt like a check in the box, something that the, you know, group home or foster care had to do, being that I was awarded a state, opposed to a cohesive experience of me actually benefiting from this tool. So I just approach it differently now that I'm in, you know, this current role and position as a therapist and a healer, opposed to how I was many years ago within the system.
I really love that. And I think for me, it was very much like, it's been various different things depending on the seasons of life that I've been a part of. So originally, I think I was very much deeply seated into survival mode. And so I needed more so people around me that could speak life into me. So fortunately, throughout those very dark times in care and even before care, leading up to that, just the random people that I would meet just walking in life, like a grocery store clerk, you know, a compliment, that went a long way in the spaces where I felt so alone and so confused and just like, I'm not sure if I have any control over my life. And it very, very much just felt like I didn't. I was trapped. And I think being able to see people that had experiences in poverty, experiences with the child welfare system, that were doing things that I didn't really see could be possible because of my past experience, that was extremely healing for me, being in survival mode and being able to see like, this isn't forever. Like I can do something with my life. And then eventually being able to start to express myself after feeling so suppressed and like, I have to be a certain way. I have to, you know, mold and conform in order to, you know, be the best. And best in the way of accepted in the foster home, in social workers, you know, I have to be a certain way. I have to perform a certain way. And it didn't really feel genuine or unique. So to myself, or honest, honestly, a lot of times it just was like, I know these are different things I have to do in order to survive. So I would say in that sense, in survival mode, all those different aspects, and then more so moving into how do I express myself? Who am I? How do I want to be who I am? Whoever that is, you know, that there's so many layers into unfolding that identity piece in healing. And really, to what James was saying, looking at the holistic aspect. So not just the talking, but being introduced to spiritual practices like meditating and really seeing that from not the ethnocentric way that it's poised to us, like this is a specific way that this is for, versus the cultural and going back to the roots of the lens to look that through, if that makes sense. So instead of looking at it in the way of like, this is just something to quiet your mind, really looking at it from the, in my culture, looking at that from the Indigenous and African perspective of like, where did that really come from? Like, how did we view that as a people? And so that also goes into the healing of identity and who you are as an individual in this space, whether that is someone that had poverty experience, foster care experience, but really looking at all those different layers. And it is tedious, but making space for that.
I love your guys' answers. I think that's amazing that for me personally, I believe that, you know, therapy is definitely pushed on us in foster care, and as if like that's the band-aid to it, as in like, this is how you're gonna get better, especially experiencing the trauma that we went through. And for me personally, like the PTSD and just going through foster home to foster home where I never saw anybody like me, and I never had anybody that went through the same experiences. And so as a reconnecting Indigenous person, meditation definitely was a way to reconnect back to myself and my body, just to remind myself, you know, that I can have control over that. And it's also mindfulness. It's learning, you know, how we're able to, you know, recenter ourselves in community. Again, like I know as many foster youth, you know, a lot of us didn't have community going through the foster care system because you're being jumped from one home to another home to another home. And I would say coming out of the foster care system, one thing that helped me was building my own community, because again, therapy isn't for everybody. And a lot of people just having talk therapy, especially with therapists that might not be the same color as you or have the same experiences, can be really hard and difficult for youth. And again, for me, it was also reconnecting back to my Indigenous culture, my language and my tradition, even though that was also scarring because I had to reconnect back to it. And that loss of that culture and identity played a huge impact. But once I was able to, you know, get just some part of it, it really blossomed and helped me grow into the person that I am today.
Thank you all for your thoughtful answers, and there's a lot to get through there for sure in all of that. But I think a really important piece is this community. Even all of us sitting in this panel together and having worked on something, I feel like has built community, and I've seen how important that is to hear your story and someone else and vice versa. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about this community piece. So what were some resources or even individuals who really supported you in your healing and well-being?
Yeah, so I can start us out. So for me, definitely my family was a big community support system for me. I was able to reconnect back with my siblings, and that was a big piece to my puzzle. And I had mentors, and I also met this woman named Sylvia Bacamonte, who was a social justice warrior. She was a social worker, and she was working at my transitional aged housing. And she taught me everything when it came to how to be as an Indigenous woman and how to hold myself and how to create space for myself. And as all of us experience going to the foster care system, many of us might not have those parental figures that, you know, that are there to support us. And I didn't have that. And so to have this one woman look at me and for me to tell her my story and for her to go, wow, like that gave me chills. And I could see you going to UC Berkeley and I want you to succeed. It really did something for me. And it made me realize that, you know, I have that power. And I have a story, and many other people have the same story. And what they need is for us to, you know, speak about it and for us to, you know, advocate for it and to talk about the things that might not be comfortable to talk about. And so I would say Sylvia and my family and my community that I'm reconnecting with now and that I'm making where I live right now with like other local Indigenous people and people of color have really made me understand that like community is such an importance, and I'm so thankful for him.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think for me, mine's was more of a post group. Like after I emancipated myself at 16 because I had the fear of just aging out. Like, I mean, I'm 36 now, so you got to imagine this was 20 years ago. I'm sure the system, Department of Social Services, and all these other systems are now working way more better to ensure that children don't age out, and they got independent living programs and stuff like that. But 20 years ago, it was you turn 18, you got to go type thing. So for me, I foreseen that, and I just was like, well, I can just leave now and make it happen on my own. But one of the people who assisted me in that journey was one of the staff workers at the group home that I was in, and but interestingly enough, he was also in my wedding. Like, that's how we still connected to this day, based on him seeing something in me to just allow me to get that nourishment from a positive male figure. So I since I emancipated myself at 16, like 16 to 18 up until going to college, I was technically homeless. So when I went to college, freshman year, I would sneak back in the dorm for winter break, summer break, spring break, and stuff like that. And he got wind of it and was like, nah, man, you can just stay here. So he allowed me to stay with him during some of those breaks. And then, of course, going into my sophomore year, I decided I didn't want to be a burden with him, nor did I still want to sneak in the dorm during those breaks. So that's when I joined the Army. And joining the military to me was the resources or the set of people that I guess you can say that assisted me in my well-being, because there, like, it was universality, it was cohesive. I was forced to connect and mingle with a whole different set of beings, males from all walks of life, different characteristics, different cultures, different identities, but we were enmeshed based on this unique experience of being soldiers. So for me, that definitely was a part of my support system. And then now, just having a small circle of friends that I identify with, that I, converse with on a regular and interact with, letting our children play together and having that community, if you will, just based on life experiences and who we are now. So for me, I definitely think it's important. But I think, as a youth now, you have to identify those pockets of peace in people that can transfer something to you. So whether that is a staff worker in one of the homes that you're in, or a foster parent, identify them as somebody that you can gain mentorship from, because that's important. It's definitely beneficial to your achievement, to your growth as a person. And even still, like, beyond that, once you leave the system, still seek mentorship, whether that's from somebody at work or somebody in the community, because all well-rounded person, this will contribute to your being. You can always learn from somebody.
Wow, I loved both of your responses, and my voice is going out for some reason, but it's okay. Um, so, oh man, I would say resources. One was definitely being a part of a well-known organization's internship program in Oregon, and being connected with some truly incredible folks with lived experience for a summer. And it was extremely healing to work alongside them and connect with them about just even our personal experiences. And I think sometimes you think you're going through life and you're in your head like, I'm the only one going through this. It's just me, no one had it as bad as I did, or no one they probably went through some of this stuff, but they didn't go through like all this stuff. And all of that was debunked, like when I went to that program and that internship, and it just brought so much healing to me, to be seen, to feel seen, and to feel like, okay, wow, these people really get it. Like, they really been through some stuff. And then being able to make some type of difference. So that was a huge resource. I think just being able to travel and connect with just, I'm going to name some people because I just have to. Louis Gasper, Eric Warner, Crystal Yanez, let's see, Toya, just amazing individuals that at that time I really needed my soul to just be fed in that way, of just true, genuine friendship and connection. And then I'm gonna have to shout out, as far as in my experience in foster care, my guardian ad litem, Liza Weidel, my therapist. Even though she was my therapist for a short while, being able to share my experience with her just gave me a full circle moment, and the ability to externalize such horrific experiences to the point that I was able to separate myself from it and realize that I could move forward. So Dr. Regina Gavin Williams. Let's see, resources, specifically different organizations that I was connected to that elevated my voice and gave me a platform to share artistically, not autistically, but artistically, through spoken word or art, music, really engaging that element of creativity through the pain that I was carrying, and have me being able to see a way that I could externalize it in these different ways that would be healing for other people. I really loved what you said, Alejandra, about how you had someone to specifically like support you and mentor you through your cultural identity. I thought that that was so amazing. And this is just a side note, but I think that that should definitely be something that organizations should look to, also for Black youth. And I think that a lot of times that gets kind of like shuffled, under the rug, because it's like, oh yeah, Black culture. But like, what I mean by Black culture is like Black before the term Blackness. So like before colonization, like a lot of us, we don't know what our ethnic background is, and that in itself is extremely damaging as far as to our identity. Black in itself, right, is a color that has been expanded into a cultural identity, a shared experience. But before that, who were we? So I feel like those are the resources that are important to highlight as well, to Alejandra's point.
Thank you. All beautifully said. I think a common theme that I heard from each of you was that feeling of being seen, like seeing the human underneath all of the stories, right? We all come with like these stories that we have, but having someone who saw you as a person, minus that, and even saw your future, your potential, and took the time and care to nurture something within you, I think is huge. And so I kind of want to shift a little bit. It has to do with being seen, which is this topic of representation. I think everyone here probably understands the struggle. We're all people of color. So I wanted to get into that a little bit of how has representation, or even a lack of representation, influenced your healing and well-being?
I think for me, it was the lack of representation. Even now, just as a Black active father, a multi-entrepreneur, multi-homeowner, and of course now a Black male therapist, it's not too many within those spectrums. So I definitely try to show up as authentic as possible and be myself. And it has worked thus far because, again, people want to connect with a genuine, authentic person opposed to a facade or, somebody putting on a show, because people can see through that, I would like to think. I know I did as a youth, going through different therapists, just like, oh man, like, so even now, if you see behind me, like, I connect with youth today through sports or shoes or, just my urban dialect, you know, because I don't try to switch it up based on what a societal standard is for professionalism, or you know, don't do certain things or whatever the case is. So although I have a master's degree, I still use urban, you know, urban vernacular, you know, ebonics, if you will, or you know, I dress a certain way just to ensure that I'm still true to me, like, because I don't believe a shirt and tie is going to make this individual more prestige or even less prestige, you know. And clients can recognize that, people can recognize that. You'll be surprised of how many people, specifically young boys or men even, that I see now, that I'm their third or fourth therapist, you know, just based on that presentation, and the moms or the wives or even them saying, you know, like, oh man, I don't know what y'all doing in the session, but this is the first time he's talked, or this is, you know, we talked the whole way home, or I'm glad you was able to get through, because they recognize like I am them, you know, so that representation is definitely important. So whether it is, again, through tattoos or urban vernacular or even dress, um, like you don't see too much of that based on where we are or where we were. I think now is migrating to people being themselves. So whether that is, you know, the hair or the dress, the different personas, the different personalities, people being more eclectic. You know, at first it just wasn't a lot of representation that looks like everybody. It's more inclusion and diversity, the equity they're still working on, but as far as including LGBTQ plus or Black or Indigenous, you know, or women even, you know, it's more representation in so many different spectrums than it was, I think, that I've ever seen. So I'm fortunate to be a part of that contribution, not only in the therapy space, but just in every space that I can encounter. I like to definitely always be different and genuine, even when I do now different consultations or different speaking events. I'm always showing up me. So that sweatpants and tennis shoes, or the slacks and dress shoes. But it's up to me, not up to I'm going here with somebody else and this guy's gonna have on a three-piece suit. Like I don't base my, you know, my opinion or dress or day based on the perception of somebody else, you know.
So for me, so I'd say I'll go with both. So with lack of representation, how has it influenced my healing? So I was in the system, like I would say it's been like 5 years. And through that time, I lived with like only people that were not of my ethnicity, and in a very rural country area. And the lack of representation affected me heavily because I experienced a lot of racism, a lot of microaggressions, a lot of just trauma based on the fact that I was Indigenous, and I was a person of color from my own foster parents, where they, you know, they would say things, they comment on my hair, where they'd be like, oh, well, you look really Latina. And they'd make fun of that. And there wasn't any like social workers that were supportive when it came to me reconnecting back to my Indigenous culture. So I had there was a lot of bias there. And that affected me heavily in my identity, especially because Veronica, you understand where it's the Native American boarding schools and just the trauma that Indigenous people have faced when it came to our cultural genocide, and how it's been taken away from us. And that's what happened to me when I was in foster care, because my mom was Indigenous and my mom is Indigenous, and we were, you know, centered around Indigenous language, around culture and identity. And once I was put in foster care was when all of that was ripped away. And I would say that influenced me in the sense that I felt like I was lost and I didn't have an identity, and I struggled on finding myself in my community. And I know that there's a lot of youth that face that as well. And what I would say is a resource that supported me is, again, like meeting Sylvia and meeting people of color that have also experienced that in the foster care system, and basically just reconnecting back to people of color and reconnecting back to my roots, and having people there that supported me through that. So that's my.
Yeah. How do I want to go about this? With specifically representation, I think to add on to what the other panelists have shared, really the mentality, representation in the mentality as well. I think that for me, I very much felt isolated and kind of like alone, because I felt like in care, there were a lot of, I mean, I didn't know that at the time, but looking back, there were a lot of biases, right? There were a lot of things that I was having to battle against with my siblings, about my family, just wanting to keep us together in everybody's mentality about separation and individualized case plans, even though we're a family unit, which was very frustrating. You know, how is that restorative or with the focus of reunification as foster care preaches? And so I think as I've gotten older as an adult, it's really healing those wounds of family separation, and also really getting clear on learning and trying to digest the microcosms of the history of child welfare and the history of like my lineage of family, the history of Blackness. I mean, there's so many layers. And so just really trying to operate and be healthy in these different systems day to day, and even being able to connect with, in my experience, I thought it was just the physical representation. But as I've gotten more and deeper into this work, I realized too that it's also the mental representation of there's another person here that stands for different core values and liberation focused for me specifically, or like holistic health and wellness. Like these people, we're seeing each other. I feel seen, and I know we're seeing each other. And that has been incredibly healing for me as an adult, with being touched by so many different systems, including the child welfare system.
Yes, thank you. I think what that question really like highlighted for me was that, right, on top of being taken from your home and your culture and the people you know, on top of that, we're also battling a whole bunch of invisible battles, right, against bias, discrimination, racism, all of these things. So it's not a surprise that you have a lot externally and internally happening for you, that it's not surprising that so many young people are in survival mode, right? Because you're battling quite a bit. So that's what I wanted to speak about next is how do we move from or transition from surviving into healing?
Yeah, so I would say how we can transition from survival into healing is being honest about what healing means. Healing is not just like this, let's sing a song and things are great. Healing takes time, and it's patience, and it's addressing, being honest about it and being real. It's the idea that this is a long-term journey. Going through the foster care system, experiencing PTSD is not something that you can get over within 5 years. This is through your whole life, basically, for foster youth. We're going to be healing and working through these issues, generational issues as well, through the rest of our lives. And I would say for me, it was, being honest about my PTSD and being honest about what it meant to take care of myself and how to break out of the generational habits and the generational trauma. So I would say basically just being really honest and saying that it's not always therapy, it's not always just meditating, it's maybe sitting there and letting yourself cry and letting yourself really feel those emotions, and being real and honest with yourself, and being honest with everybody about what it means for mental health support.
What I would add on that is just that one, and on an individual level, it's absolutely a choice. I think that in working with youth, a lot of times we can get stuck in like, but this happened and it's their fault, and it's everyone else's fault, which may or may not be true, but also like it's our responsibility, it's our life. And at some point you become an adult, right? And you have to create a life that you enjoy, that you feel free to be yourself, to express yourself, to give back into the community. And so I think the biggest how is making the choice, but also to Alejandra's point, like acknowledging where you are, as well as acknowledging the systemic influences on how you feel and what you've experienced. Not to the point, though, that you're crippled by any type of future that you're able to create for yourself. And I think being able to connect with other individuals that are on the journey of healing and share similar or the same core values and principles can absolutely get you to the place that you want to be. But you have to dream big, and you can't see yourself in a box or put yourself in a box, because you're not going to be able to really move forward and give back to the community in the ways that you want to, or make the traction, or make the impact that you want in your life. You really have to make that choice. You have to be intentional, and you have to be honest, and you have to just take it one step at a time. And I've had days where I'm like crying my eyes out about something that I thought I got over, but something happened that day and it sent me back. And that doesn't mean now that like everything is erased that I've built and created. It just means that I have to hold space for that. I'm a human. We're humans. We're not like robots that are just supposed to pick up and okay, all that happened, now move on and throw it under the bus or throw it under the rug and let's just keep going. Like, make space for that, be intentional about it, and you can definitely get through it.
So I would say also that a lot of people aren't living because they're always surviving. So whether that is a youth or a trans person or indigenous person or a Black man, like it's always survival mode. It's always hypervigilant. It's always the stress of the world, carrying different weight. So I would definitely say to move towards that healing place, you have to identify and recognize that it's not a linear process, so it's going to be some turbulence on the way. It's also going to be what the heck is going on, because realistically, healing is not a set destination. It should be something that you constantly practice, like I don't foresee you ever arriving at healing, you know what I'm saying? Like, and even if you do, you want to continuously to get better and evolve within self. So me personally, I would just say continue to identify what that looks like for you, and just be open to those changes, because adversity is going to happen. It's going to be times where you have to be resilient, and it's going to be times to where you have to take flight, so you have to figure that out. But neither is going to determine your strength or your weakness. It's just going to determine you being able to evolve from where you started from, so again, like many of us who are viewing this were in the system at one point or currently in the system now. So don't look at it as if like once I'm out of the system, I'll be healed, or once I'm away from this specific group of people, I'm going to be healed, or once this happened, I'm going to be healed. View it as I still got work to do. I still have to heal beyond where I am now or where I plan to get to, so it looks different for everybody. It's no set destination.
Yeah, exactly. All of it, like so good. Yeah, I think when it comes to healing and the foster care system, like many other things in the foster care system, right? We're trying to like check a box. We're like, we connected this young person to therapy. Check, they should be on their healing journey. Give them 10 sessions and we did it. Like, which, you know, and you've all said that word linear, right? Like, very linear. There's like a start and an end point, and it's got to be short and quick, right? We're producing, and I feel like we've taken on a very like colonial mindset when it comes to that healing. And so that's kind of what our next question is about, is in your words, what are some practical steps to decolonizing our approach to well-being? I know that was a big one.
Okay, so for me, I would say introducing cultural connections is definitely a way to do that. It's like how Veronica was saying, you know, the Western world is just checking off boxes. And, you know, we really forget the reason behind that. Like, why are we doing this? And for Indigenous people, it's our perspective on it is not only like why it happened, but like what we were deprived of as well. And I would definitely say that is another step to decolonizing, is really looking at that and looking at like the Western way and versus like the Indigenous way, which is like, you know, really reconnecting back to the roots, back to the motherland, back to like our culture and our resources.
No,
Oh, go ahead, James. Okay. I was just gonna say, fund our Black, Indigenous, and people of color healers and holistic practitioners. Like, at the end of the day, we can't really make any type of traction if there's not a set pot of money, just like with every other thing, where there's a focus on, you know, here's a pot of money for safety of youth, which, by the way, the numbers and statistics are not saying that internal safety or that external safety as a focus is really supporting our youth and families. So something to look at is what is actually working and what has worked before the intervention of systems in order to integrate that and really make that the core principles and practices within our welfare system. Because the way that it's going now, to be blunt, is shitty. It's not really working out. And, you know, for everyone else, it's just, you know, it sounds like it's being progressive politically, but it's not progressive on the ground and with families and with youth, because the statistics should not be 70% children to, oh my goodness, child welfare system to prison pipeline, 70% of youth. I'm just like floored by that in 2022. And the same thing for young girls and sex trafficking. How are we at 70%? Like, how is safety a number one concern? And the numbers are that does not add up at all. So obviously you're not doing the right things. Like, that's just the truth. It's great that you got the little statistics and the, you know, the things that looks really great with the graphs and everything. But it's not really progressive. It's not actually moving forward. So what are the things that we actually need to fund and put that pocket of money towards on the holistic end, and really look at those policies and procedures? Because at this particular time, it's not working.
yeah, I would agree. I think we also have to identify what the overall route is. Like, you know, who is in charge of certain budgets, of certain decisions, and all those things. Because when I think decolonization, I'm thinking more of a new independence, like this is me type thing. So, and I could probably can liken this back to the question earlier about the lack of representation as well. Because if it was more voices of people within those circumstances, I think that the funds would be divvied up differently. So if you take an institution like the NFL, right? Like, the owner of the NFL didn't even play in the NFL. You know what I'm saying? So he's making decisions based on, these athletes and he don't know what it's like to go to practice or, get injured on Sunday and not be away from your family traveling. Well, he probably can identify that because he traveled to games, but like the severitiness of it, the lifelong injuries that they're going to sustain beyond the game, like he's not going to experience that. So the same thing within this, I think the people who are making these decisions for the institutions or the foster care system or the group home systems or Department of Social Services or child welfare, like a percentage of them people weren't in the system. So all they know is, or all they're thinking is, I can do this for this child. I can do this for this, adolescent, not knowing that this child, this adolescent, this person has been traumatized, has been victimized, has been uprooted from a life that they once knew, or, is now you got this Black boy now with an all white family, or this indigenous girl with the all, Hispanic family, or, this young lady now living with all males or whatever the case is. Like, so now it's adjustment disorders. It's so many different things coming, but I guess the people making decisions thinking they're making the correct decision or they're ignoring it totally. So I think, again, like once it's more inclusion from people like us who's been in those spaces, who's been neglected or didn't have certain resources or didn't have access to certain things, can say, hey, no, I don't think that's a good decision. You know what I'm saying? Like if you look now too, like look how many commercials you've seen, like who approved this commercial? Like that doesn't even make sense. You got men talking about women, or you got people talking about XYZ. Like, what? Was it any Black people in the room when they put this out? Like, how did they not know that this was going to offend somebody? So I think this is the same way. Like, it's so many different examples of, like, yo, get somebody at the table who's experienced this or who can tell you, like, this doesn't make sense. Until then, I think it's going to still be that it's going to be colonized because it's going to be washed down. It's not going to be the actual version of what it is, because realistically, if my perception of what their reality is, it's going to be, oh, well, we got you with this nice family. Okay, to you, it's a nice family, but to me, I'm out of place. Nobody looks like me. Nobody talks like me. Nobody has been through what I've been through. Like, how can I connect with this nice family if I'm not a part of, or if I don't feel like the family, So I think they view it as, we took you out your situation and put you in another situation that's better for you. But that's all suggestive as well. You know what I'm saying? So I think it can be decolonized once we evolve to, let's bring everybody in. What is your take? What do you think we should do here? What do you think these fundings should go? Opposed to, I got this job because I went to school, and but you have no other relative experience to being in this actual system, or going to group home, foster care, or what's it like to be ripped from, like, think about it. Like, I'm a therapist now. I work with social workers all the time. My first encounter with a social worker was being pulled from school saying I'm going to foster care. Like, that could have tainted my whole reality of what social workers are. Like, oh no, y'all separate families. You know what I'm saying? Like, think about how many people now, even as little kids, view police officers bad because that first encounter with the police officer was a reprimand opposed to a community servant. You know what I'm saying? So again, I think it has to be more of people at the table who were in those systems.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I feel like for each one of your answers, I'm like, keep going, give them all the knowledge, drop all the knowledge. But yes, I think that mentality of saviorism is really harmful, because then that fails to acknowledge what you've lost in this better home or this better setting, as Alejandra kind of spoke about earlier. So I appreciate you all diving deep with me on this topic and sharing your wisdom with me and the viewers. So I do want to end not on like a high note, but like, a little bit of hope. I think that's always a positive way to end. So that's where our last question is taking us, which is, What is your hope for the healing and well-being of youth currently experiencing care or those who may enter in the future?
So my hope is definitely around community-centered, freedom-focused, and healing as opposed to coping. But for the embedded holistic health and wellness practice for each constituent, really taking care on the back end and on the front end of the human needs of those foster parents, social workers, youth, families, and really being able to center that as opposed to like it being very transactional. It's really hard if you internalize that you're just a number or a case number, or you're just a random person that's just kind of passing through, to be able to have even some mental stability about your present and your future. You can't resolve your past because you have this, fleeting present. There's no stability. There's no concrete individual that you can connect to. It's just, you're just kind of there. And it's like, it doesn't matter if I'm not there.
James, you can go.
I appreciate you. I would say do what's best for you and your journey. So, connect with the right people or shy away from those people that you feel, aren't conducive to your growth. It's all important in how you look at it, but definitely ensure that you're going to be vulnerable and open to new experiences, because life is forever changing, it's forever evolving. So just because you're in a system now, that doesn't dictate like how you can turn out. Look at the panel, and you can utilize us, I'm sure, as a resource. So whether that's reaching out to us directly or just following our journey, it's always a start, and that destination you can always build upon. So if I had to leave you with anything, it would definitely be ignore the perception of others and do what's best for your journey. And I'm hoping that the experience that you gather on the way will continue to roll down and assist somebody else, who is probably going to experience what you're going to experience, because this thing is not going away. Like, things happen. We all have our reasons for why we were in the system, whether that was in our control or beyond our control. I was in the group home with people who did some things that got removed from their home based on them being mischievous. I was in the system based on my father dying and my mom getting sick with epilepsy. So it's not like we can pick and choose who goes where. You can only make the best of what situations that you encounter. So definitely continue to grow and be open to that growth, because you never know who's looking at you or who's going to need you as that example to continue to go further within our journey.
Yeah, so I would say for me personally, my hope for the future for youth that are currently experiencing the foster care system is strength, but I also think the system needs to change. That to me is where our hope and well-being for the youth will be, because the system needs to change first. And it's youth having more opportunities. It's youth being connected to CASA workers, social workers that look just like them or have the same experiences. It's more funding. It's us, really looking at these pipelines to the foster youth to prison pipeline, the foster youth to sex trafficking pipeline. It's us looking at why we're taking away youth and we're not trying to keep these families together. It's and I eventually say, like, my hope for the future of the foster care system is it becoming abolished and us focusing on community well-being and support, because I think what it needs to start as is us building communities and supporting communities first, and us helping single parents and us helping parents to have better resources and to have if people need mental health support, then we get them that. It's really making sure that we keep these families together first before we try and rip them away. Because as we're seeing, youth that are going to the foster care system, are experiencing the same amount of trauma. So, I mean, some are good, but for me, it is the foster care system changing, and it's people being held accountable, and us really seeing a difference in that system. And then for youth, it would be, you know, them realizing that we all have the strength and courage to persevere, and we can all do it. And you know, there are people that have stories just like you and just like us that are here speaking on this panel, and to know that we see you and we hear you, and to know that you are strong and you can do this. And if you guys want to reach out to us, feel free to, because I would love to, you know, connect to other foster youth, and just for us to understand that we're not alone in this, that we're all fighting this battle, but we're in this together. We're a community without us even knowing it.
Yes, that last part, we are a community. There's an experience that ties us all together. I think that's a beautiful statement. Yes, so we are at the end of our panel here today. I just want to say I am super grateful that each of you have shown up and have taken the time to share your truth and your perspective on this topic. I think this topic is one that we don't get a chance to talk about enough and often enough. And so, yeah, being in this space with each of you has been healing in and of itself, and finding that commonality. And so I do hope that people that are watching this, I'm hoping that this has expanded that conversation around healing. And also for young people, yeah, like there's community here, and really, you know, open-armed community, and to utilize that. And anyways, I'm just so grateful, and we will go ahead and end this now. Thank you so much for being here and listening to our fourth fostering care panel conversation on the long-term healing and well-being of current and former youth in care. I want to say thank you to Angela, James, and Alejandra for sharing their insights, perspective, their wisdom with us. I hope, if anything, that you got from this conversation that it is healing is not linear, and many alumni in care, including myself, are still on this journey and still work towards healing every day. I also want to say thank you to CASA First, or the Court-Appointed Special Advocates, First Judicial District, based out of Santa Fe, New Mexico. They are my home organization and my foundation to do this work. So I have so much gratitude for our team and their support in this project. It wouldn't have happened without them. I also want to mention, if you haven't already checked out the other conversations we've had on navigating lived experience and advocacy, on perspective from Indigenous youth on child welfare, and the foster care to prison pipeline. These conversations are available on our YouTube channel, so please take some time to check those out, just as this was super urgent and important conversation. The other thing I'll mention is, if you haven't followed us on social media yet, I highly encourage that to stay up to date with everything that CASA First is doing. We're a small team, but we're doing a lot, and I will drop all of our social media links in the description below. Again, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next conversation.